They say it was a paradise, a shining city of herons, surrounded by endless water and light, a place where the first Aztecs were born, before time, before empire, before history itself. But what if Aztlan wasn't a myth at all? What if the lost homeland of the Aztecs still lies buried somewhere beneath the deserts of America? They called it Aztlan, the place of herons, the island of beginnings, a paradise said to lie far to the north, where rivers met the sea, and the ancestors of the Aztecs first rose from the mist. Some say it was only a myth, a divine story to explain the Aztecs' origin. Others believe it was real, a lost city buried somewhere beneath the sands of the American Southwest. Today, archaeologists and explorers still chase that echo, searching for proof that this mythical homeland once stood on what is now U.S. soil. 1,000 years ago, legend says a great civilization began to crumble under drought and war, forcing its people to leave their shining city. Guided by their god Huitzilopochtli, they carried a promise that one day they would find a new home where an eagle would perch on a cactus, devouring a snake, marking the heart of a future empire, Tenochtitlan. But before that empire rose, there was Aztlan, the cradle of their story. Ancient Aztec codices describe Aztlan as an island surrounded by water, with 7 caves symbolizing the birthplaces of 7 tribes, the ancestors of the great Mesoamerican nations. Strangely, in the American Southwest, archaeologists have found settlements with pyramidal mounds, sun-aligned temples, and symbols that mirror early Aztec art. Could the ancestors of the Aztecs have once lived among the Hohokam, the Mogollon, or the ancestral Puebloans? Spanish explorers in the 1500s recorded indigenous tales of a homeland far to the north, beyond the deserts, perhaps across the very lands that now make up Arizona, Utah, and New Mexico. Coincidence or hidden truth? The story of Aztlan might be more than myth. It could be a lost chapter of North American history. If Aztlan truly existed here, it would rewrite everything we know about the roots of the Aztec Empire and the civilizations that came before. Somewhere beneath the deserts of the Southwest, beneath centuries of dust and silence, the birthplace of an empire may still be waiting to be found. Across the sun-scorched deserts of the American Southwest, a growing number of historians and archaeologists are beginning to wonder, could the traces of Aztlan still lie buried beneath the soil of Arizona, New Mexico, or even Utah? Part legend, part mystery, the search for this mythical homeland has drawn explorers for centuries. Ancient Aztec codices describe Aztlan as a lush island surrounded by water, yet the American Southwest seems the last place one would expect to find such a paradise. Still, the evidence, subtle, fragmented, and haunting, suggests that this region once held a far different landscape. Thousands of years ago, the climate was milder, rivers flowed stronger, and vast wetlands shimmered where deserts now stretch. It is entirely possible that the early ancestors of the Aztecs lived in a region of abundance that, over time, turned to dust. As archaeologists map out prehistoric trade routes, they find something astonishing: long-distance networks connecting the Southwest to ancient Mesoamerica. Shells from the Pacific, copper from northern Mexico, macaw feathers from the tropics, all found in ancient villages near the Gila and Salt rivers. These discoveries prove that cultural exchange across the continent was real and thriving. Some researchers now believe that what we call trade might have actually been migration, the slow generational journey of a people following their gods toward destiny. Rock art scattered across canyon walls in Utah and Arizona adds to the mystery. Spirals, serpents, and sun symbols eerily resemble designs found in Aztec temples centuries later. Were these coincidences, or remnants of a shared origin story? Oral histories from several southwestern tribes, including the Hopi and the Pima, tell of ancestors who came from a northern island or crossed great waters before settling in the desert. The parallels are striking, not just in story, but in spirit. Could Aztlan have been more than a single city? Perhaps it was a cultural memory, a spiritual homeland that lived in the hearts of many tribes who once shared the same northern territories before their paths diverged. Even Spanish chroniclers of the 1500s recorded indigenous accounts of a land called Aztlan, far to the north, where white herons gathered along blue rivers, imagery that matches the wetlands of ancient Arizona and southern Utah. Beneath layers of sand and silence, the clues continue to emerge. Canals older than history, pottery etched with serpent motifs, and burial mounds aligned to the solstice sun. Each discovery pushes the story of Aztlan further north, blurring the line between myth and memory. If the homeland of the Aztecs truly began here, then the story of America's ancient past may be far more connected and far more astonishing than we ever imagined. As the mystery of Aztlan deepens, researchers turn to the landscape, not for legends, but for patterns. Hidden among the deserts and canyons of the American Southwest are fragments of a forgotten world. Stone tools, petroglyphs, burial mounds, and abandoned settlements that whisper of migration, faith, and transformation. These clues, scattered like breadcrumbs, may trace the Aztecs' legendary journey south. When archaeologists compare the architectural footprints of ancient peoples, strange parallels begin to emerge. In Arizona, the canal systems of the Hohokam mirror the irrigation layouts found later in Aztec cities. In New Mexico, the great houses of the ancestral Puebloans align with celestial events, just as temples in Tenochtitlan did centuries later. Even the Mogollon and Fremont cultures carved symbols of serpents, suns, and eagles, all sacred icons in later Aztec mythology. Could these similarities be echoes of a shared origin? Linguists have found another thread. The Nahuatl language spoken by the Aztecs belongs to the Uto-Aztecan family, which stretches from the deserts of Utah and Arizona all the way down to central Mexico. That linguistic connection isn't a coincidence. It's a roadmap. It suggests that the ancestors of the Aztecs once lived far to the north before gradually migrating south over centuries. Along the way, their culture evolved, absorbing the traditions of those they met, but their language carried their identity like a seed waiting to bloom. If Aztlan was indeed their northern home, then its memory survived not just in myth, but in words, in the names of rivers, mountains, and tribes scattered across the western United States. Some linguists believe the name Aztlan itself may derive from a term meaning place of whiteness or place of herons, a poetic echo of ancient wetlands that once dotted the Sonoran landscape. Others argue it could refer to the northern lands, a clue that aligns perfectly with indigenous oral traditions describing migration from regions near modern-day Arizona, Utah, and New Mexico. But evidence goes beyond language. When DNA researchers began studying the genetic links between indigenous peoples of North America and the descendants of the Aztecs, surprising connections began to surface. Genetic markers shared among tribes of the Southwest and Central Mexico hint at ancient movement between the two regions. While genetics can't pinpoint an exact city or date, it paints a picture of a vast, interconnected world, where cultures were not isolated, but part of a long, living continuum stretching across thousands of miles. Ancient trade routes support this idea. Archaeologists have uncovered turquoise from New Mexico buried in Aztec temples, macaw feathers from southern Mexico found in Arizona villages, and seashell jewelry from the Pacific coast appearing in both regions. These weren't random exchanges. They were the arteries of a continent-spanning civilization. And if goods could travel that far, so could people, carrying stories, beliefs, and gods with them. One of the most haunting clues lies in Aztec art and codices themselves. In the famous Codex Boturini, a beautifully drawn map traces the Aztecs' migration from Aztlan to Tenochtitlan. It shows a long, winding path dotted with rivers, mountains, and temples, features that some scholars believe correspond to real locations along the North American landscape. The codex even includes depictions of deserts and cactus-covered plains that look strikingly similar to the Sonoran and Chihuahuan deserts of the Southwest. Could these have been the lands the Aztecs once crossed on their journey? According to the codices, the migration from Aztlan wasn't a single event. It was a centuries-long odyssey, guided by divine vision and survival. The people who left Aztlan were not fleeing randomly. They were following prophecy. Their god, Huitzilopochtli, told them to wander until they saw the sacred sign, an eagle perched on a cactus devouring a serpent. That image would later become the symbol of Mexico itself, immortalized on the national flag. But the path that led them there began somewhere far older and far north. Some archaeologists speculate that the departure from Aztlan could correspond with a real historical event, perhaps a great drought or social collapse that struck the southwest around 1100 CE. During that time, major civilizations like the Hohokam and the ancestral Puebloans began to decline. Massive irrigation canals dried up, and once thriving cities were suddenly abandoned. What if one of those cities, destroyed by nature's fury or human conflict, was remembered in later myth as the lost paradise of Aztlan? Even the way the Aztecs described their homeland fits with this theory. They spoke of a place with 7 caves, called Chicamoztoc, from which the 7 tribes of their people emerged. In the deserts of New Mexico and Arizona, there are regions riddled with cave systems and rock shelters that may have inspired this imagery. To the people who once lived there, those caves could have symbolized the womb of creation, the very place humanity first emerged into the world. And then there are the water legends. The Aztecs remembered Aztlan as an island surrounded by lakes or rivers. Archaeological evidence suggests that ancient Arizona and Utah were once home to vast inland lakes that dried up long before European contact. Over generations, the memory of these watery lands may have transformed into myth, a paradise lost to time, preserved only through stories. As the clues converge, from language to art, from DNA to landscape, the possibility that Aztlan once existed in the American Southwest no longer seems impossible. The line between myth and memory blurs. Perhaps Aztlan was not just a single place, but a region, a network of thriving settlements connected by water, trade, and faith, that eventually birthed one of the greatest civilizations in the Western Hemisphere. If this is true, then the story of the Aztecs does not begin in the heart of Mexico. It begins here, in the red canyons and dry rivers of the American desert. The same ground where ancient engineers built canals, artists carved rock, and dreamers followed the stars, may also be the birthplace of the Aztec Empire. And if the truth of Aztlan still lies buried here, beneath centuries of dust and silence, then the myth may yet become history, waiting for the day the earth decides to tell its story again. For centuries, Aztlan has existed at the crossroads between myth and archaeology, a phantom homeland that refuses to be pinned to any map. Yet, despite the haze of legend, scholars, explorers, and dreamers have long searched the deserts and mountains of the American Southwest for signs of where this mythical city might have once stood. Theories are as vast as the landscape itself, but each one is driven by the same question: was Aztlan real? The most enduring theory places Aztlan somewhere in northern Mexico or the American Southwest, along the Gila or Colorado rivers. Supporters of this view point to the Hohokam civilization, whose vast canal networks and agricultural prowess mirror the later engineering of the Aztecs. The Hohokam flourished between 300 and 1450 CE. Their capital near present-day Phoenix boasted over 500 miles of irrigation canals, turning arid land into farmland. To some archaeologists, the Hohokam were not just a parallel culture. They were the ancestors of the Mexica, the people who would one day call themselves the Aztecs. Others argue that Aztlan lay farther north, in Utah or New Mexico, where ancient rock art tells stories that echo Aztec creation myths. Petroglyphs in the San Juan River basin depict serpents, eagles, and sunbursts, symbols later revered in Aztec religion. Even more striking are depictions of 7 caves, or Chicamoztoc, matching the Aztec tale of the 7 tribes emerging from the womb of the earth. Could these carvings be the oldest visual records of Aztlan's memory? Still, not all scholars take the myth literally. Some anthropologists believe Aztlan was never a single geographic location, but rather a spiritual origin, representing a lost golden age of unity. To the Mexica, Aztlan symbolized not just where they came from, but what they had lost: peace, prosperity, and harmony with nature. When they migrated south, they didn't just leave behind a place, they left behind a way of life. Over centuries, this nostalgia transformed into legend, until memory became mythology. But not everyone is content with symbolism. In the 20th century, explorers and local historians began scouring the desert for tangible proof. In 1904, ethnologist Adolphe Bandelier proposed that Aztlan was located near the Gulf of California, suggesting that the Mexica might have migrated inland after living near coastal wetlands. Later, historian Donald C. Cutter placed Aztlan in the lower Colorado River Valley, where archaeological evidence of early Uto-Aztecan speakers overlaps with ancient floodplain settlements. Modern researchers, armed with new tools like LiDAR scanning and satellite mapping, are revisiting these old theories. Recent surveys have uncovered buried canal systems and settlement patterns across southern Arizona and northern Mexico that show signs of mass migration. Entire populations moving over centuries. Some of these sites, like Casa Grande and Snaketown, bear ceremonial platforms and ball courts strikingly similar to Aztec ritual spaces. Could these have been the last northern outposts of a people destined to transform into empire builders? Then there's the Sinagua theory, which places Aztlan near central Arizona, around the Verde Valley. The Sinagua people lived between 500 and 1400 CE, leaving behind cliff dwellings, stone pueblos, and painted pottery that share artistic elements with early Aztec designs. Some of their artifacts depict feathered serpents and water deities, clear parallels to the Aztec god Quetzalcoatl. Intriguingly, when the Sinagua suddenly vanished in the 15th century, the Aztecs in central Mexico were just rising to power. Could these timelines be more than coincidence? Adding to the mystery are native oral traditions from tribes across the Southwest. The Pima, Tohono O'odham, and Zuni all speak of ancient migrations from the north or south, depending on the story, and some mention a great city destroyed by water or fire. When these stories are layered with Aztec myths, they form a pattern of shared memory, one that stretches across thousands of miles and hundreds of years. Yet, despite tantalizing parallels, Aztlan remains elusive. No site has ever been definitively proven to match the descriptions from Aztec codices. Part of the challenge lies in time itself. The Aztecs were recounting events that took place hundreds of years before their rise, oral traditions that blurred with every generation. Over time, floods, droughts, and invasions may have erased whatever ruins once stood as evidence. The desert, ever patient, hides its secrets well. But for some, the truth of Aztlan doesn't need to be proven with artifacts. In the 1960s and 1970s, during the height of the Chicano movement, Aztlan was reborn, not as a lost city, but as a symbol of cultural identity. Mexican Americans across the United States began referring to the American Southwest as Aztlan, the ancestral homeland of their people. For them, the legend was not about archaeology, it was about belonging. The ancient myth became a modern rallying cry for pride, unity, and reclamation of heritage. This cultural revival reignited scholarly debate. Some historians now suggest that the myth of Aztlan might have dual meanings, one ancient, one modern. The ancient Aztlan may have been a real migration memory. The modern Aztlan, a metaphor for indigenous and Mexican identity rooted in the same lands. In both interpretations, the message remains powerful. Aztlan is home, past, present, and eternal. Even today, archaeologists continue to explore the deserts of the American Southwest, armed with drones, ground-penetrating radar, and a sense of wonder. Each pottery shard, each buried canal, each forgotten ruin adds another piece to the puzzle. Some believe the answer will one day rise from the dust. Others think Aztlan's truth lies not in stone, but in the human spirit, in the stories that refuse to die. Whether real or imagined, Aztlan endures because it speaks to something universal. Our longing for origin, our search for connection, and our belief that somewhere beyond the horizon there is a place where it all began. A place where rivers flowed through deserts, where gods spoke through dreams, and where a people began their journey to shape history. Perhaps Aztlan was never lost at all. Perhaps it's been here all along, hidden not beneath the sand, but within the soul of the land itself. The legend of Aztlan didn't end when the Aztecs left their northern homeland. In many ways, that's where its story truly began. As the Mexica journeyed south, guided by their god Huitzilopochtli, the memory of Aztlan became their compass. Every village they built, every temple they raised, carried echoes of that lost paradise they had once called home. And though the sands of time have buried Aztlan's true location, its spirit has endured, evolving, transforming, and finding new meaning across centuries, all the way into the heart of modern America. To the Aztecs, Aztlan wasn't just geography, it was identity. It was the sacred beginning of their people, a promise that even in exile they carried divine purpose. Their migration from Aztlan became the central myth of their civilization, a story of endurance, destiny, and rebirth. When the Aztecs founded Tenochtitlan in the Valley of Mexico, they believed they had fulfilled the prophecy that began in Aztlan, the prophecy of the eagle, the cactus, and the serpent. The symbol that adorns the Mexican flag today isn't just national pride. It's the closing chapter of Aztlan's ancient tale. But over the centuries, as empires fell and borders changed, Aztlan found new life in unexpected places. When Spanish conquistadors conquered Mexico in the 1500s, they tried to erase indigenous history, burning codices, silencing languages, and replacing myth with doctrine. Yet Aztlan survived, passed down in whispers and symbols. The legend crossed deserts and mountains, traveling north again, carried by descendants who refused to forget where they came from. By the 20th century, Aztlan had resurfaced, not as a lost city waiting to be unearthed, but as a living idea. During the Chicano civil rights movement of the 1960s and 1970s, Mexican Americans across the United States began to reclaim their indigenous heritage, calling the American Southwest Aztlan, the rightful homeland of their ancestors. To them, Aztlan was not buried beneath sand, but beneath centuries of colonization. The word became a rallying cry, a symbol of pride, identity, and resistance. In 1969, at the Chicano Youth Liberation Conference in Denver, activists proclaimed El Plan Espiritual de Aztlan, the spiritual plan of Aztlan, a declaration that linked the ancient myth to modern cultural and political empowerment. The message was powerful. The land that had once been home to the ancestors was still sacred, still theirs in spirit. For many, Aztlan became both a reminder of what was lost and a vision of what could still be reclaimed. Yet the modern legacy of Aztlan isn't just about politics, it's about connection. Across the American Southwest, descendants of indigenous Mexican and mixed heritage communities still carry fragments of that ancient story. The motifs of Aztlan, serpents, herons, eagles, and the rising sun, appear in murals, festivals, and oral traditions from Arizona to California. Artists and storytellers reinterpret the legend not as fantasy, but as living history. Archaeologists continue to dig, historians continue to debate, and people across generations continue to wonder, could the land beneath our feet once have been the cradle of the Aztec world? From Utah's canyon walls to Arizona's desert valleys, the ruins tell a story that feels eerily familiar. Cities built with astronomical precision, sacred mounds aligned with the stars, canals engineered to harness the desert's scarce water. The similarities to ancient Mesoamerica are undeniable. Whether by migration, trade, or divine inspiration, the link between the civilizations of the Southwest and those of central Mexico feels too strong to dismiss. Perhaps the truth of Aztlan is not one of geography, but of continuity, a shared cultural heartbeat that pulsed across a continent. Even in modern academia, the myth of Aztlan continues to challenge assumptions. If Aztlan truly lay in the American Southwest, it means the roots of Mesoamerican civilization stretch far deeper into North America than history books have admitted. It means the story of America, of its first peoples, its lost cities, and its forgotten engineers, is far more interconnected than once believed. And it means that before there was a Mexico, before there was a United States, there was a vast world of civilizations rising and falling, connected by rivers, stars, and shared memory. For archaeologists, Aztlan remains a mystery, a puzzle of pottery shards, glyphs, and migration routes waiting to align. For spiritual seekers, it's a symbol of origin, proof that the human need to belong transcends time. And for millions of people today, Aztlan is a mirror, reflecting both who they are and where they come from. Whether found in the earth or in the heart, Aztlan represents something timeless, the eternal quest to remember our beginnings. As the sun sets over the desert, the land seems to whisper. The wind hums across the dry riverbeds, carrying echoes of ancient songs. Maybe, somewhere out there, beneath centuries of dust, lies a city that once shimmered in the morning light, its towers reflected in calm waters, its people looking to the south, ready to begin a journey that would reshape a continent. Or maybe Aztlan was never meant to be found, because it was never lost. It lives on in the stories, in the art, and in the blood of those who still remember. Aztlan may have begun as legend, but today it stands as legacy, a testament to the endurance of culture, memory, and belief. It reminds us that history isn't just written in stone or buried in ruins. It's carried in voices, in symbols, and in spirit. And sometimes the greatest civilizations are not the ones we uncover, but the ones we continue to imagine. So as we look to the horizon, beyond the desert and the ruins, we're left with one lingering question. If Aztlan truly existed, if its people once walked this very ground, what else about our past still lies waiting to be rediscovered? Perhaps in the end, that is the real power of Aztlan, not the promise of a city lost to time, but the invitation to keep searching. As the desert winds fade into twilight, one truth endures: legends never truly die. They wait, silent and patient, beneath the dust of time. Whether Aztlan was a real place or a realm of memory, its story has shaped centuries of belief and identity. It reminds us that history is not just a record of what happened, but a reflection of what we remember and what we still seek to understand. From the canyons of Utah to the valleys of Mexico, the echoes of Aztlan continue to call, whispering through ancient ruins, through forgotten symbols carved in stone, through the hearts of those who still wonder where it all began. And maybe, just maybe, the next discovery will bring us one step closer to uncovering the truth, a truth that could rewrite not only Aztec history, but the story of the Americas themselves. This is Forgotten Civilization, where the past is never truly gone. It's just waiting to be found.